Yeah, I mean, I live in a big equine area. There's horse trails all over the place. We always see horses on trails. I grew up riding horses, and I always kind of would cringe when people would let their horses or let their dogs just run up to the horse and say hello, or just, oh, my dog wants to say hi. And I'm like, my horse doesn't want to say hi. So it was really important to me to get her to sit. If you see a horse, if there's a horse around, you need to sit, you need to be still. We're not going to battle with this horse right now. And it's obviously, girlfriend, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And all the people, all the equestrians now look at me, they go, oh my God, she's so well behaved. And it's like she had a very clear expectation. She was not to be that dog
Right.
around horses.
Yeah.
So I think owners need to set standards as well.
Yeah.
She's just a dog, or, oh, she's just doing dog things. And I think you just need to be more aware of your environment.
Right. And one of the things I always say is be aware that not every dog or horse you meet is going to have the same rules. In other words, they people often say, "Oh, my dog just wants to say hello." But they may not know that your dog doesn't like other dogs, or they might not know that your dog is uncomfortable with that. And so, part of it is when I see a dog approaching me is if I'm concerned about it, especially if I know it's the kind of problem that my dog has with certain breed or a certain size of dog or whatever, I'll say my dog is, even though I think my dog is the friendliest dog in the world, I'll start by saying my dog's not comfortable meeting other dogs. Please, can you walk a little bit further away? And I'd much rather advocate for the safety of my dog than criticize them for what they're doing or have to do something harsh with my dog. We'll just set expectations up. And usually in the city, most people kind of learn to be careful because they don't know what other dogs are going to be like anyway. But it's never assume that another dog is going to be okay with whatever you're okay with.
And how do you feel about different values of treats? Is that something you believe in, that sometimes you need to up the value of your treat, or some distractions are going to need a higher value treat versus?
Sure. We know from the science, we know from the literature, from experiments that have been done on training, that different value treats, different value toys, different types of tactile, everything has different value to your dog. And so when a dog is dealing with a high level distraction, you need a higher value treat to combat it. And I think people, for whatever reason, people will get all bent out of shape about the fact that, well, I'm just bribing my dog. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think of it as bribing. You are reinforcing the dog for good behavior. And I always think about it when I think about work. When people go to work, you expect to be paid.
Right.
And why do we expect our dogs to have somehow a higher moral compass than we do? We demand payment. I mean, sometimes we may volunteer for an organization that's important to us and we volunteer our time. But if we don't get anything from it, the reason we do it is because it makes us feel good. If we volunteer at the local shelter, it's because we like to play with the dogs, and that's our reinforcement.
Yeah.
But when you finally get a job doing something, you want to get paid. And if you learn that you're going to get paid every other week or every 2 weeks, that's fine as long as it meets your expectation. That's all we're doing with our dogs, is we're saying, here's our expectations. You meet those expectations, you're going to get paid. And it doesn't mean you have to pay them every single time, but I don't know, when you think about how dogs live in the world, if you think about dogs when they were wild, running around in nature, the reason they would run fast is because they wanted to catch the rabbit to eat it. If the reason that they ran away is because the big predator looked scary and they managed to get to safety. Every action that they take as a wild animal is to achieve or get away from something. And it's when they get there, when they get that or escape from that, that is their reinforcer. And that's what we're doing, is we're just recreating how they can learn to survive, thrive, and excel living in the world that we've created for them. And so treats, toys, praise are very important to them. We just have to find the right things at the right time. And so,
and I think it's important for people to realize too, if your dog isn't food motivated, like you said, some dogs, my dog could care less if I'm praising her, but if I bust out a toy or like I said, string cheese, it is like next level. So maybe if your dog isn't food motivated, it is worth a shot to try other rewards, right?
Absolutely. When I talk about being a positive reinforcement trainer, people often assume that means that I must be chucking cookies at my dog
Yeah.
all the time. That is positive reinforcement, but so too is learning what games my dog likes to play. Some dogs love a good game of tug.
Yep.
Others like to chew a tennis ball. I have a little dog who loves toys, but only if they have a squeaky thing in them so that they can squeak them. You have to figure out what it is your dog likes. And just like people, we all like different things. Some people like a good beer, others prefer a glass of wine, and others prefer a soda, and others are just water drinkers. They're all valuable to us.
Right.
They're different based on the individual. It's the same thing with our dogs. And dogs love attention from their owner, but just a rub on the chest may not be enough to
Yeah.
keep a dog from chasing a squirrel. So you have to recognize that every dog has different value that they place on different types of reinforcers. And once you learn what they are, you can learn to use them properly. And that may be playing a game of tug, or being able
Yeah.
to chew a toy, or being able to scratch them under the neck or under the belly, etc. You just have to find what those things are. Something that a professional trainer can help you learn to do, or you can figure it out for yourself. And most
Yeah.
most dog owners I know may not be trainers at all, but you can usually say, what do you think they prefer? A pet on the back or a piece of chicken? Or
Yeah.
you think they would rather have a piece of kibble or a tennis ball? And almost every dog owner I know is able to say, yes, they'll pick this over that.
Yeah.
It's because you know what your dogs like and you know what they enjoy, and you can turn those into reinforcers that help you get the behavior that you want, the behavior that you desire. And you end up building a really strong relationship with your dog as well, because that's what relationships are about. They're about shared reinforcers. Not because, when you think about your significant other, why do you love them? It's because they reinforce you. It doesn't mean that they pay you, and it doesn't mean that they give you food. It means that they give you attention, they give you affection, they're funny, they're good conversationalists, they like going on hikes with you. There are things that you do, and it's why you like them is because of all the reinforcers that you get from them. And if you think about someone you don't like, why don't you like them? Well, it's because they're condescending, or they're mean, or they're not fair to you, or they belittle you. Those are all aversives, and aversives cause a relationship to break down, and reinforcers cause a relationship to flourish.
Yeah, I had always had dogs that were really food motivated and, like I said, pretty easily trained. So with this new puppy, or my newer addition, it was a novice. It was a brand new idea to me that I was like, there's different treat values, and my trainer was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, she won't work this hard, for real meat, but she'll work this hard for cheese.
Right.
And then once that I had gotten her into agility, she loved it. She was thriving. We were in it for about a year, and then I kind of saw her excitement dwindle. And one of the trainers was like, have you ever tried playing tug
Right.
at the end of agility? And it changed her agility game. It absolutely changed. And
Yep.
sometimes she'll do tug for half of the course, and then for the second half we'll go back to cheese because she's done with tug. But I don't. For some reason, it was just never something I ever thought of, that there might be different values and different treats. So I just thought that was so interesting that they kind of have their preference.
Yeah, it's very individual, and that's one of the things we have to learn. One size doesn't fit all. One reinforcer is not the same for all. And I always bring it back to us as people. Think about what we like. We go to a restaurant. I may always choose the burger, but my wife will almost always choose something else. It's not the burger. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
But the point is, why? Because we have different tastes and we have different values. Dogs are the same way. I think that people often say, for example, that their dogs don't enjoy tactile. Dogs love tactile from their owners, but the problem is when you're teaching something, you want to reach down and go pet, pet, tickle, scratch, scratch. But the reality is, when you're sitting down and giving your dog a long massage while watching your favorite TV show, that's a 30-minute interaction and a massage. in a training session, you're not able to give them a 30-minute massage. And so you
Right.
reach down and go, rub, rub. And it's kind of like when someone comes behind you and squeezes your shoulders and you feel good and then they walk away and you're going,
You're like, wait.
hey, come back. It's not that they don't like tactile, it's just hard to make tactile in a training scenario reinforcing because it's just so brief. And so
Yeah.
often we have to wait to use those kinds of reinforcers when you have 30 minutes to give them that good massage that is really, really reinforcing for them. And so it's not that it doesn't work, it just doesn't work in those training situations. When you're going for a walk, you're not going to stop every couple of minutes and have your dog lay down and give them a massage. And reaching down and just pet isn't going to be enough for that tactile to be reinforcing.
That's actually a really good segue to the next question that I had for you, which is how long should training sessions be and how often should people be doing them?
I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. My goal, usually when I teach dogs in the early stages, when they're just learning to learn, I encourage my clients to keep their sessions short, literally 1 to 2 minutes long at the most. But it's much better to get, if I'm spending a half an hour with a client, we can get 5 or 6 2-minute sessions into a 30-minute time frame. And those 5 or 6 1 to 2 minute sessions will do far more than one 10-minute session. But
Yeah.
what I would also suggest is that as dogs learn to learn, and as you build a relationship with your dog, I have a dog that I have been working with for 14 years now. He's a much older dog and he's used to training, and I can work with him out in the field for 45 minutes to an hour straight.
Wow.
But that's because he's learned to enjoy training, and now I can do longer sessions.
Right.
And it's very much the difference between a kindergartner who is in school and just learning basic things and moving from new activities all the time. And when you're in college, you go to a class that may last a full hour, and you're thinking, but you can't get away with that with a 5-year-old who's
Right.
just learning to learn. And so you can build on those skills, and dogs that have learned to enjoy training and enjoy learning can do longer and longer sessions. But at the beginning, I would keep learning sessions short and do more of them, just keeping each session a short session so that they learn in little bits.
I know you said obviously you're a huge advocate for positive reinforcement. So this question is, what training methods do you recommend, and are there any that you discourage? So I would assume that you would lead with positive reinforcement. Are there any? Does this kind of go back to our shot collar question? Of is there anything you just really feel like just doesn't work?
Yeah, my goal is in teaching people to train is to look to the use of positive reinforcement and to gravitate away from the use of punishers or aversives
Yeah.
because of the fact that it breaks down a relationship, because it can cause the dog to look for other alternatives to the unwanted behavior, and you may not like those alternatives.
Right.
So I'm very much motivated by positive reinforcement, by trying to make learning fun for your animals so that they want to learn things. What you find is when you start training a dog using positive reinforcement, he doesn't want the training session to end. And so I just do frequent sessions and do them at a variety of times, teaching them little skills here and there so that I can build a repertoire that allows me to have what people refer to as a really well-behaved dog. But my dog doesn't think of it that way. He doesn't think he's a well-behaved dog. He just says, my dad just likes to play games, and I play
Yeah.
games with him, and those games just happen to be things that to the outside world look like they're well behaved, but my dog is doing them because they're fun for him and he's enjoying them.
Do you think it's important for everybody in the house to have some authority and help with training the dogs, or do you think there should be one person in the house who works on it and then the dog should just follow suit? You know, if you have young children,
Yeah.
I have nieces and nephews, and I have them do private agility lessons with my dog because I'm like, we got to get her to listen to you guys, and
Yeah.
let's do it in a fun, enriching environment.
Absolutely. I think anybody who lives with the dog is going to benefit from doing training with the dog. However, I understand that there are going to be people in the house who love to train and others who are too busy, don't have the time or the interest in training. And that's fine.
Yeah.
Often you can the primary person who works with the dog on a regular basis may be the one who teaches the dog how to sit, lay down, and come when called. And then once it's learned, you can then transfer that and say, if you say this, this is how the dog should respond, and you teach everybody else in the household how to get the behaviors you need from the dog and how to reinforce them. Um, but I do think there's benefit in having everyone involved in teaching the dog and teaching the dog that when mom says sit, it means the same thing as when dad says sit.
Right.
And when 5-year-old Joey says sit, it means the same thing.
Right.
But you do want to be careful. I think there's a certain age, it's usually around the age of 5 or 6 that young kids can really begin to understand training
Yeah.
and understand the rules around what how they should interact with the dog.
Yeah.
But I always feel that kids need to be taught how to interact safely with the pets that they have in their home, so that the dog isn't finding himself in a situation where the kids are jumping on top of him all the
Right.
time, doing things that are wrong. And so I think learning the responsibility of interacting and behaving around a dog is an important skill that all kids should learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Even with dogs that aren't your own, right? Just in general, for younger kids to learn how to approach a dog or to ask if it's okay if they approach. Not every dog is
Absolutely.
raised in a household with kids, so some dogs may want nothing to do with it.
I think it's important to teach kids that exactly that, especially if you have a dog that they can go and hug every day. You want them to know not every
Yeah.
dog is okay being hugged. And it's very similar to what we teach kids. It's okay to hug your mom and dad and maybe your grandma and
Right.
grandpa, but you don't go hug a stranger.
Right.
That stranger danger kind of thing. And I think it's important that kids learn the same thing about dogs that they don't know. Teach them to say, "Hi, can I pet your dog?"
Yeah.
And if the person says no, not today, or no, please don't, that you don't.
Right.
And I think that's just a good safety thing for
Just in
everybody. I wish
general.
everybody remembered not to just assume that you can reach down and pet someone else's dog, because not
Yeah.
all dogs like that.
Yeah. Especially like you said with the whole stranger danger thing. Even a lot of dogs have it as well too, right? So
Absolutely.
um
Absolutely.
I have one last kind of fun question that someone asked, and it is, can I train my cat the same way I train my dog?
Yes, yes, with some caveats. What I mean by that is, I am a firm believer. I used to tell my students, I used to teach a graduate course on animal training, and I would say to them, you can teach an earthworm or a Harvard graduate using the exact same tools. But of course, the difference between an earthworm and a Harvard graduate is huge. With a Harvard graduate, they have the ability to understand language and you can give instructions. An earthworm is a fairly simple minded creature and their repertoire is not as great. Cats are very, very amenable to training, but their behavior is different. And so they don't necessarily always like the same reinforcers. You may not find the same things are useful with cats, but when a cat learns that you have good things and you are willing to give them those good things in exchange for behavior, they will become the best trained cat you've ever seen.
Yeah.
People just don't usually think of training the cat, but absolutely, cats are very, very trainable. I've trained many cats in my life, and it's amazing how responsive they are, just as dogs are. They don't necessarily like the same reinforcers, so you have to find those things that they find valuable.
What's the most interesting thing you've ever trained a cat to do?
Well, I've trained them to do a lot of things. I've trained them to sit. I've trained them to go into their kennel. One of the things that was most interesting, I trained them to climb a rope to get up to a certain
Oh,
certain
wow.
perch somewhere. I've
Yeah.
taught them to jump from platform to platform. I've trained them to ride in the back of a little backpack. I've
Oh,
trained them.
yeah.
There's just lots of things that I've trained them to do. One of the best reinforcers for cats. Many cats love certain kinds of food like tuna and chicken, but cats also love toys. Toys that bounce around and that they can follow or chase after. And I don't have one in my office that I could show you, but I have a little feathery thing on the end of a wire, and when you just
Oh.
hold it bounces and the cats get so excited about it. And so I can cue something, and when they do it, I let that feather come bouncing around them and they chase it for a couple of seconds, and then I've learned how to grab it and make it look like it's disappeared.
Yeah.
And so they look at me, how do I get that
They're
thing to
like,
come
what?
out again?
Where'd it go?
And I can teach them to sit, or I can teach them to touch a target, I can teach them to go someplace. And as soon as they do what I've asked, the magic feather suddenly appears and they start chasing it. And that can be a wonderful, very motivating reinforcer for a cat. And often it doesn't require you to carry any food with you at all, but the cat will be very motivated by it. But just like dogs, they are individuals. You can't say all cats like this.
Right.
They're all different, and you find out what are the things that that particular cat finds most reinforcing, what's most value to them.
I have one last kind of personal question for me too. So did you start off with dogs and cats and then you got into wildlife? I know you have some amazing projects under your belt. How have you, what got you, not what got you into this, but let everybody know how great you are. I mean, what is one of your favorite projects that you've worked on? I mean, I
I mean,
think you've done
I'll
so many
start
great
by
things.
answering your first question is how I got started. When I was in high school, I lived in a town that had a guide dog school, and they were looking for
Oh,
youth volunteers to help them. And when I first volunteered at the guide dog center, I used to clean bowls, clean kennels, prep dog food, and I hardly ever got to touch an actual dog. But I watched the trainers train these dogs to do these amazing things to guide people that are visually impaired. And I remember as a kid, I thought, that's what I want to do. I
yeah.
play with dogs all day long, but train them for this noble purpose. And
Right.
of course, guide dog training is really a cool kind of training. You're talking about dogs that are really know how to stop when there's something that could be dangerous and make sure that you don't trip down the stairs, and being aware of tree trunks that you could walk into and watching for things and learning a lot of skills. A normal guide dog knows how to respond to well over 100 or 200 different cues that helps keep their guardians, their handlers safe. And so that's what motivated me to go into training. But before I ever became officially a guide dog trainer, I had an opportunity to work in a zoological facility working with zoo animals. And it turned out that the same things that I had learned about training dogs applied to tigers and applied to birds of prey and applied to other animals. So my career has been long. I've been very lucky. I've been training now for over 50 years, and
Wow.
it's included some of the projects that have been most fascinating to me. In 2015, I worked with the London Botanical Garden, who, as part of their gala, they were doing a botanical display about symbiosis, and they had all these beautiful plants and lots of butterflies living among the plants. And the director of the garden said, boy, wouldn't it be cool if we could teach the butterflies that when the symphony orchestra is playing for our fundraiser, if on a certain note the butterflies would all take off at the same time and
Oh my
fly
gosh.
across the stadium. And I said, well, that would be possible. That would be fairly easy to train. And she said, really? And we went about teaching the animals to fly from one side of the botanical garden was in a stadium, and we taught
Yeah.
the butterflies to go from one part of the stadium across over the heads of the gala participants and the symphony
Wow.
orchestra to the other side. And everybody was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's
But
my
when I talk to
response.
people, I say, haven't you ever trained your dog to come when called? And they go, well, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's all we did with the butterflies. We taught them a cue, and they were simply came to the sound of the cue when we sounded it. And it was a simple, basic come behavior. But because
Yeah.
it's butterflies, it was amazing.
Yeah,
But
no, my mind is blown. I'm like,
yeah,
wow, that
that's an example. And then I do a lot of what I call conservation work.
love that. Yeah.
One of the projects that I'm working on right now is we're in the 8th year of a project where elephants in Zambia migrate toward Tanzania every year. And as they make their way to Tanzania, they cross through a little corner of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And when they cross through the border, the Democratic Republic of Congo doesn't have good poacher protection in that area, and usually 60 to 75 elephants are slaughtered every year as they cross the border. And so the question was, could we teach the elephants to take a different route, to bypass the Democratic Republic of Congo? And so we created a training plan to teach the elephants to circumnavigate around the Democratic Republic of Congo so that they wouldn't get poached. And that's been a very successful project for us, as we've managed to successfully teach elephants to take a new route.
That's
And
amazing
that's
because their migration routes are ingrained in them, right? I mean, they're almost,
centuries old
yeah,
migration routes, but yet we were able to teach them to go another route because we were able to teach them, A, that they could avoid being killed, B, that we put man-made watering holes, which is why they're migrating, is to head toward better sources of water at that time of the year. We put
yeah,
a few watering holes along the way, and it reinforces them for going in the new route. They eventually get to where they're going, and they get there without being slaughtered, without having danger. And it's been a very successful project, but it's been a long time in the making. It took us 10 years to get the permits and to show
wow,
that we weren't going to have a detrimental impact to other wildlife. And then
right.
another 10 years to work through the training process. And we're 8 years into the project now, and it's been very successful. And that population that had been declining for 30 years started to rebound. And we're now seeing the population of elephants get bigger because they're not being poached anymore. And that was something that we were able to do through training. And there are dozens of projects like
Amazing.
that
Absolutely amazing.
that I'm able to participate in. And these are much more complex projects than doing simple things like training your dog.
Right.
But it's the same technology. It's the same use of reinforcers to teach animals to do the behavior you want and keep them from doing the behavior you don't want, which for the elephants is we want them to go a different route. We want them to avoid the old route. And we were very successful in teaching them that. And we had to teach that without interacting directly with the elephants,
Right.
because we're trying not to impact them in too negative of a way. And so
Right.
we have to do this through a process that's called remote training, where the animals are learning without coming into contact with people at all.
That's absolutely amazing. I mean, I commend you for all your conservation work. And
Thank you.
I mean, even training butterflies. I know you said it's just a simple, come cue, but I'm so impressed by that. But Ken, it was great to have you on today. We'll have to have you on again when we get some more of these fun behavioral training questions in here for you.
Well,
We
I
really
love
appreciate you joining us.
Well, thank you, Mallory. I enjoy talking training, so it's always fun to chat about training things. So happy to.
Yeah. Well, we will definitely have you back. And for everybody who's listening and viewing, thank you guys for joining us on another episode of Irreplaceable Tales, and we will see you soon.